He dug out a secret underground shelter by himself. Using hand tools, he turned a raw pit into 2 separate rooms with real floors and handmade furniture. To endure winter underground, he built a cooking hearth, added insulation, and designed his own ventilation system. Facing rain and glass-shattering temperatures, he will evolve his dugout step by step. And it all starts with the first shovel cut. He marks the future shelter at roughly 7 feet wide and 14 feet long. It is small enough to dig by hand, but large enough to hold 2 rooms underground. For the next 3 days, he shovels it out. The sandy soil cuts easier than heavy clay and goes easier on his back. That is what makes this shelter possible for one man. But heavy structural logs are coming next, and a raw pit is no place to lower them safely. So he carves 4 steps into the side, turning the excavation into a proper work site. These logs will become the dugout's main columns. By stripping away the bark, he removes the layer where moisture, insects, and mold can hide. Left alone, that layer could slowly rot the structure from within. The bark will be repurposed to fuel a fire pit, a crucial step in protecting the future columns. The lower ends of these logs will stay underground in direct contact with damp soil. So he uses an old method and chars the bases black, creating a carbonized outer layer that helps slow rot that would otherwise destroy it within a single season. While the posts char in the open fire, he returns to the pit and bores the primary post holes. He needs to reach at least 2 feet deep, giving each column enough buried length to resist shifting and leaning once the structure begins to carry real weight. These columns have to do more than hold the log walls in place. They will carry the roof above them, and later, the weight of the soil that turns it into an underground shelter. At this stage, precision matters more than speed. A leaning column now becomes a crooked roof later. So each post is adjusted, checked, and packed hard with earth until it stands solid and straight. Once the 6 columns are standing, he can begin tying the structure together with the first roof beams. Roman owns this quiet village property far from the city. He has always wanted to spend more time here, but there is no real house yet. The dugout is his way of changing that. A sturdy, handmade shelter where he could stay overnight, even through the coldest part of an Eastern European winter. With the foundations and structural frame ready, he is one step closer to his dream. But he cannot start dragging in dozens of heavy logs for the walls yet. The sandy soil made the pit possible to dig by hand, but it will not survive repeated trips with heavy timber. The stairs would quickly crumble. This is the first real turning point of the build. The pit is dug, the columns are standing, and the first beams tie the structure together. He has finally created the shelter's foundation, and the project starts to feel real. But as the day turns to rain, the future shelter is still an open pit, one rainy day away from becoming a pond. The rain stops the walls from moving forward, but it does not stop the build. Instead, Roman uses the weather to his advantage. Damp soil grips itself better than dry sand, so this is the right moment to carve the first version of the hearth directly into the earth. This is the beginning of the kitchen hearth, the fire system that will later cook food, dry the room, and help turn an open pit into a warm underground shelter. The next challenge is giving the smoke a way out. The chimney has to be cut carefully. One wrong move with the auger could collapse the earthen hearth underneath. But if the connection holds, he can light the first fire inside the shelter. Its heat will help dry the rain-soaked pit and prepare the space for the walls. Seeing that first small flame stay lit is a wonderful proof of concept. The hearth drafts just right, the smoke climbs out, and Roman can finally turn his attention to the walls. But the rain has left one important reminder. In an underground shelter, water is not just a weather problem, it is a construction problem. Water management must be carefully designed. Any moisture that reaches the wall logs can stay trapped against the wood, feeding rot long after the rain is gone. So the blue tarp gets a second job. It becomes the first waterproof skin of the shelter, separating the wall logs from the damp soil around them. The base logs are the exception. They still sit directly against the shelter floor, so their surfaces have been charred for protection. Horizontal log walls are one of the oldest ways to build a shelter. Wood naturally insulates because its fibers hold tiny pockets of air that slow heat loss. But a dugout adds something a normal cabin does not: thermal mass. Soil changes temperature slowly, absorbing and releasing heat over time instead of reacting quickly like open air. Together, the earth buffers the cold, the logs hold the warmth, and even a small hearth can be enough to keep the shelter warm. But the hearth cannot remain a raw hole in the wall. The first fire was only a test. With enough of the wall built, it's time to turn the rough niche into a masonry hearth. The stonework will support the loose soil, resists direct flame, and add thermal mass to hold warmth after the fire burns down. With the hearth built into the wall, the dugout is about to gain its first real domestic system. Roman still has to lock the chimney chute in place, making sure the earth cannot collapse around the flue before the remaining walls go up. Soon, he will have to build a roof strong enough to carry tons of earth, add doors and windows, and seal the shelter before winter arrives. If he misses that window, the dugout may have to wait until next year. The remaining walls rise one log at a time. Each section takes about a dozen heavy timbers, each one stripped, cut to length, lifted into place, and hammered into the structure by hand. Moving this much timber makes Roman realize that excavating the 4-foot pit may have been the easy part. As the walls near full height, he needs to pack earth around the outside and start burying the shelter to stabilize the walls. But the chimney flue is still exposed, and if buried, the weight of the soil would crush the metal pipe eventually. He builds a chimney surround from the ground up, stacking heavy rocks in mortar around the pipe to give it a protective shell. Once the masonry is in place, the soil can come back against this side of the shelter. Larger stones will form a retaining wall, holding the backfill in place as the dugout begins to change from an open pit into a buried shelter. But in solo builds, nothing is ever easy. As Roman shovels back the same soil he spent days digging out of the ground, his focus is fixed on extending the chimney shell as he goes, until he finally realizes something. The chimney is just too short and is about to be buried by the rising soil. The flue is already cut to length and firmly locked into the base of the chute below. There is no easy way to swap it out. So Roman does what every DIY builder eventually has to do. He improvises. A piece of flexible ventilation will extend the flue up, protected by the same masonry shell, but he can't really finish it until he knows the exact final height of the structure. And that means only one thing. It is time to build the roof. The roof will require plenty of straight, strong timber, and the nearby forest has plenty of it. Roman relies on fallen pine and spruce, clearing deadwood that is already drying on the ground just a short walk from his property. Their straight trunks make them ideal for structural load-bearing. Each rafter is carved with a saddle notch, a curved cut that lets one round log sit securely over another. Without it, round timber can roll or shift. The joint also uses gravity to its advantage. The heavier the roof gets, the tighter the notch grips the structure below. This engineering is crucial. This roof is not just a cover, It will be buried under packed soil and eventually loaded with winter snow. That combined weight is far beyond what a simple roof is meant to carry. He must build it as a structural support, not just a canopy. The dugout is no longer just a hole in the ground. The skeleton of a real shelter is beginning to emerge. Before snow falls and temperatures drop below freezing, he needs the shelter sealed. But the weather refuses to give a rest. These autumn rains are a constant reminder that winter is closing in fast. But when building against a deadline, you can't afford to lose a day to bad weather. So Roman shifts focus inside. This will be his first piece of furniture, a rough bench built from the leftover roof logs. Using simple stakes driven into the ground and the shape of the wall to hold the cross pieces in place, he creates a rough support for a log bench. It is not the comfortable version he wants to build later. But for now, it gives the shelter its first place to sit. It is a humble start, but pulling that bench up to the stone hearth changes the feeling of the whole space. It becomes a glimpse of what is coming next. A working off-grid kitchen with custom shelving inside a warm refuge hidden beneath the earth. And nothing shows the potential of this underground kitchen better than his first dinner inside it. He has never built a shelter before, but he has dreamed of it for years. He is willing to learn by doing, fix what fails, and keep going. In the end, perseverance will matter more than a perfect plan. Very soon, Roman will finally be able to spend the night here too, just as he always wanted. But first, the roof has to be completed. With the first half of the roof in place, Roman starts working the logs for the second half, and the peeled bark becomes important again. It will fuel another fire, needed to protect a new piece of structural timber. Working on the roof has given him a clearer sense of the weight above it, and the true scale of the dugout. He is building a two-room shelter, and the long overhead beam may need extra support to carry packed earth and snow. So he decides to add a central column, and the bark-fueled fire will be used to char its base. He selects a prime log for the column and cuts a precise V-shaped saddle notch at the top. The notch will give the round beam a secure, cradled seat, helping transfer the weight down while keeping the beam from shifting sideways. He also chars a heavy log for the bottom of the dividing wall. Both will sit directly against the ground and need to be treated to resist rot. Roman stretches his working hours. And now with the new central column in place, the second half of the roof can finally move forward. But looking down at his future bedroom, Roman sees an opportunity. Instead of burying the roof completely, he can leave one large opening for a custom skylight to bring daylight inside. That decision marks a major milestone. The long timber hauling is finally done, and the structural phase is complete. From here on, the challenge is no longer raising the cabin, but sealing it. Before rain can surprise him again, he moves quickly to lay the waterproof layer across the roof. This heavy plastic cover will act as a shield, keeping water away from the wooden frame below. Soon, he will be sleeping underground with the stars above. With the roof height finally set, Roman can finish raising the chimney to its proper level. But back inside, the kitchen hearth needs an urgent improvement. When the fire gets too intense, it starts scorching and burning the logs directly framing the opening. In a small, underground wooden shelter, this isn't just damaging the structure, it's a major safety concern. The hearth was still a work in progress, but now it can't wait. Before he can keep using it, he has to elevate this basic fire pit into a proper kitchen fireplace, lining the opening with a thick masonry surround to completely isolate the flames from the wood. The wall above the fire is now protected, and the hearth can be used safely. But heat only matters if the room can actually hold it. The next priority is closing the remaining gaps in the walls, and for that, he needs to set the door and window frames. Roman switches from round logs to dimensional lumber for the frames. Logs are strong, but uneven. For doors and windows, he needs straight edges, square corners, and flat surfaces that can hold glass, hinges, and seals. But the straight edges of the boards will not sit flush against the rough walls, so Roman packs fibrous insulation around the frames, filling the uneven gaps. At first, the window frames may look unfinished, but the open top is intentional. The pane will slide in from the top, and a narrow groove holds it in place until he closes the frame around it. The skylight will make the room feel less enclosed, and the added sun exposure helps dry out humidity, a crucial step in fighting mold in an underground shelter. But most importantly, he can now close the roof for good. With the skylight frame in place, the work has now shifted from the brute force of hauling hundreds of heavy logs to precise joinery and delicate finishing. Instead of glass, he uses a clear plastic pane. As the cabin settles, and as the wood shifts, contracts, and expands with the weather, glass could crack under pressure. This is the nature of a solo build. It demands total commitment and a real love for the craft. Every nail, seam, and hidden detail depends on one person's meticulous effort. And that effort is finally visible. The dugout no longer looks like a covered pit. For the first time, it looks like a shelter about to be completed. Soon, Roman will turn to the interior and start handcrafting his own furniture and setting up the thermal regulation framework needed, like proper insulation and a ventilation system, before the thermometer drops below freezing. But to stay ahead of the weather, he has to stretch his working hours long after the sun goes down, closing the last openings. This is a major milestone. But a solo build always finds a way to throw one more curveball. The roofline over the entrance sits too low for the original steps. Every time Roman comes in or out, he bumps his head on the low timber. Since raising the heavy roof isn't an option, he relies on the flexibility of bushcraft engineering. He creates the headroom he needs from below by digging the earthen steps into a deeper walkway. It is a harsh lesson, but the steps will have to be properly finished later. When building this way, if something does not fit, the answer is usually more work. And today, that extra work pays twice. The soil he removes from the entrance is exactly what he needs next. Because now, the shelter is ready to be buried. Securing the skylight glass marks the moment the roof is finally sealed, but also the beginning of his next challenge. Now, every bit of excavated soil Roman spent days digging out has to come back over the roof and around the walls until this shelter completely blends back into the earth. From Neolithic longhouses to pioneer sod buildings, buried homes are far from new. People have long used earth to protect against cold, wind, and weather. The soil blanket creates thermal mass, slowing the exchange between the cold air outside and the interior below. Dry grass on top helps prevent erosion and adds a final insulating layer, trapping pockets of air beneath the snow. Together, they help create a steadier, more energy-efficient refuge. But what elevates this primitive shelter from a cave into a real home is a working door. Roman will finally finish closing the shelter, just in time before the cold weather arrives. The door may look simple, but it hides a clever system that will help the underground shelter breathe. Roman drills a row of small holes near the bottom, creating a controlled air intake through the door. A small hinged flap will cover the holes, letting him open the intake when the fire needs air and close it when the room needs to hold warmth. Just like the charring he used to protect the foundations, this burning process seals the timber, but it also gives the door a distinct rustic look that beautifully exposes the grain. The door is ready, but the entrance is not. Roman had to dig the steps deeper to stop hitting the roofline. This fixed the problem, but they have to be properly finished and reinforced. It is a vulnerable place. Rain and melting snow will naturally run down here, so the sides cannot stay raw and loose. Holding back the earth is one job. Holding back the winter wind requires a much finer touch. If cold air can sneak in around the door or windows, the room will never hold warmth properly. These wooden borders cover the seams around the frames, helping seal the dugout's envelope against the coming frost. Roman hunts for the last gaps, adding small pieces of trim wherever cold air, rain, or snowmelt might slip through. The chalk rectangle in the grass has become a sealed shelter, buried under earth, framed with windows and a door, and protected from the cold. Now the work can finally move indoors. There is still a lot to build: flooring, ventilation, and a proper bed. But the first priority is simple: a kitchen table. In a small winter shelter, the kitchen is the engine of the whole space. The hearth gives heat, and the table gives a place to prepare food, eat, and organize daily life. Together, they turn survival into comfort. But to fully evolve this kitchen, the hearth must reach its final, more civilized form. Right now, it can throw sparks, pull precious warm air up the chimney, and leave an open flame exposed inside a wooden shelter. Roman has now learned that an open fire is useful, but it needs control. So he decides to upgrade the open stone hearth into something closer to a heating stove, with a glass window and a proper cast iron door. He discovered this one using a metal detector. Buried and forgotten in a nearby village for years, it is now the key piece for his shelter. The cast-iron stove door revolutionized winter living. Open fireplaces are notoriously inefficient. They burn fuel quickly and pull cold air into the room. Cast iron solved this. It allows you to choke down the oxygen and control the burn. The challenge now becomes fixing the glass in place. Too loose, and smoke will leak into the shelter. Too tight, and heat expansion will crack the glass. To create a better seal, he improvises a gasket from a piece of non-flammable rope. But the experiment fails. The rope will not bond properly with the mortar, and it keeps falling out of place. With the mortar already setting, he has to risk it and set the glass directly into the mix before it fully dries. The glass has survived, and with the fire safely contained, the primitive hearth is transformed into a highly efficient masonry stove. Roman has now a functional kitchen inside the shelter. But the seal is not perfect yet. Smoke still looks for the easiest way out, and without enough draft, that path can be right back into the room. Opening the air intake vents at the door helps create the airflow needed to pull smoke up through the flue. It works for now. However, before he can safely sleep here with a fire burning indoors, he needs to build a proper, permanent ventilation system. In a buried shelter, ventilation is a must. Without it, the shelter can quickly become uncomfortable and potentially unsafe. Smoke can spill back into the room, filling it with carbon monoxide, while warm air condenses on cold walls and windows, creating a damp environment perfect for mold growth. Roman engineers a simple but highly effective breathing system. He builds 2 ventilation shafts and drops them through the roof. By allowing the warm, stale air to leave the shelter through the ceiling, they naturally encourage fresh air to pull in through the door. Together, they create the circulation pattern the dugout needs. But fresh air comes with a catch. Cold air is heavier, so it will move across the bottom of the dugout, right where the dirt floor is already cold and damp. To keep the room comfortable, Roman has to lift the living space above that cold layer. He needs to build a raised wooden floor. The floor starts with a simple, raised joist frame. Instead of laying boards directly onto dirt, he sets the frame on flat stones. They act like small foundation pads, lifting the timber off the ground and spreading the load. That small air gap matters. It keeps the wood away from damp earth, slows cold transfer from the ground, and gives the floor a better chance to stay dry. He coats the timber in a bright yellow-green solution. This is a heavy zinc-based wood preservative that soaks deep into the surface, helping protect the joists against moisture, rot, and fungus. Laying floorboards is backbreaking work, but driving those final nails represents a massive milestone. For months, Roman has been in an exhausting race against time, single-handedly transforming a muddy pit into a fully heated home. He can finally spend the night here without real worries, and not a moment too soon. The ticking clock has run out. Overnight, the temperature has plummeted and the forest has turned white. The race is over. Winter is officially here. Roman managed to beat the season and seal his winter shelter just in time, but he still needs a proper bed. He decides to anchor the bed frame directly onto the walls. This will keep it above the coldest air near the floor, while also saving the space below for storage. Using a few notches, he locks the frame tightly into place. Then he lays down flat boards, spacing them apart for breathability. It is not as strong as a bed built on legs, but it saves space in the compact shelter and should hold well enough for him. Now that he no longer needs to sleep on the kitchen log bench, he decides to revisit his very first piece of furniture. He moves the table aside and dismantles the rough-hewn log seat. It was his first basic piece of furniture, built under the rain and good enough to sleep on, but not comfortable enough for daily use. Now he replaces it with a flat timber bench, while also shaping it around the table to create a proper dining booth. The dugout now works like a two-room cabin, a kitchen in the front, and a dedicated sleeping room in the back. But winter reveals there is still a lot of work to be done. As the cold sets in, the wood contracts and new gaps begin to open, especially in the thinner boards of the door. Unlike the thick log walls or the earth-covered roof, these boards have far less mass against the cold. So Roman packs the door with flax, a natural plant fiber used to fill uneven gaps and slow drafts. The fix works, but it uses up his entire supply, and he still needs much more to seal the rest of the cabin. He promptly orders another batch, but out here, it will take days to arrive. In the meantime, Roman decides on another way to improve the warmth in his new bedroom, adding an inner door. A smaller enclosed room will be easier to warm, and won't be exposed to the drafts still leaking through the entrance. He builds and installs a custom door frame. Because the dugout's heavy timber has already settled under the earth's weight, the rigid frame should be safe from buckling. As long as it sits perfectly square, the door will swing cleanly and seal tightly. He keeps the door design simple, but adds a creative rustic flair. Between the flat timber panels, he leaves a vertical gap and fills it with stacked short log cuts, visually tying the door back to the rugged walls around it. He fills the last gap in the wall with short log cuts shaped to size. The door can now close off the bedroom, but it is not fully sealed yet. The proper draft seals are still on their way, along with the next batch of flax insulation. The dugout is slowly evolving into a proper winter home. But the extreme cold is a harsh teacher, constantly showing him what still needs work. As soon as the flax arrives, he must seal the remaining gaps and immediately turn his attention to the ceiling. The frozen earth above acts like a massive thermal bridge, pulling rising heat out of the room. Proper roof insulation becomes the next priority. The deepest part of winter has arrived, and this is one of the coldest mornings yet. But it also brings the delivery he has been waiting for. The parcel is here. He finally has the insulation supplies needed to finish sealing the shelter. But as Roman is unpacking the boxes, the kitchen hearth suddenly bursts apart. The glass shatters into 100 little pieces. It is a textbook case of thermal shock. The freezing room temperature meets the sudden heat of the fire, and without a flexible gasket to cushion the glass, the rigid mortar leaves it nowhere to expand. So Roman does what every self-builder does when things go wrong. He sweeps up the glass, cooks breakfast over the open flames, and simply adds "fix the hearth" to his running to-do list. To fix it properly, he needs a new glass pane, and this time a gasket to protect it. But for now, the insulation supplies are finally here, and Roman starts with the door. It is a tiny strip, but it makes a major difference in blocking cold drafts at night. Then comes the long-awaited insulation. Flax is a natural plant fiber, the same basic material used to make linen. In building, it is useful because the fibers can be packed tightly into uneven gaps, where they trap small pockets of air, helping slow heat loss and block drafts. He methodically packs it into every seam, crack, and irregular joint around the shelter. This is the layer the cabin has been missing, the difference between a shelter that can be heated and one that can actually hold that heat. The roof, however, demands a more complex layered approach. Roman staples flax across the underside of the roof first, directly against the logs, where it can slow down heat loss at the highest point of the room. Then he adds a waterproof plastic layer beneath it. This helps prevent warm, moist interior air from reaching the freezing roof structure, where it could condense and create conditions for mold and rot. Finally, he uses matching wooden boards to lock everything together. They hold the insulation in place, protect the layers beneath, and instantly upgrade the rough dugout into a warmer, more finished cabin. With the insulation complete, the dugout crosses a major milestone. The basic needs for winter survival are met, and the project enters a new phase, turning a raw shelter into a comfortable home. Soon, he will build a proper tool rack for his gear and an underground pantry for fresh food when the weather warms in a few weeks. For now, he carves wooden pegs, hangs the fabric by hand, and adds one of the cabin's smallest comforts, curtains for the windows. A solo build is not carried by one perfect plan. It is carried by the willingness to keep coming back when something fails. For months, Roman has kept working, turning an open pit into a warm, insulated winter cabin, one problem at a time. That is the quiet power of perseverance. And now he is ready to try again. This time, he is armed with a heavy-duty, high-temperature fireplace silicone, specifically formulated for stoves and furnaces. It is designed to withstand extreme heat while remaining slightly flexible, making it the perfect adhesive and buffer for the stove window. The replacement pane is heat-resistant glass salvaged from an old oven. Upcycling this piece is a brilliant stroke of bushcraft engineering. Fully tempered for kitchen use, this heavy-duty glass is already proven to withstand extreme temperatures. The kitchen is fully functional again, but a kitchen is not much good without food. And as winter fades, the cabin's interior temperature will inevitably rise. He needs to find a way to keep his food fresh and safe from the heat. So he turns to the oldest refrigeration trick in the book, a subterranean pantry. He cuts a neat opening into the floorboards and, once again, starts digging into the sandy soil. The earth beneath the floor maintains a constant, cool temperature regardless of the weather above, acting as a natural, zero-energy refrigerator. For the pantry itself, he has chosen a 15-gallon food-grade plastic barrel. It is a practical choice, simple, waterproof, easy to open, and large enough to hold a small reserve of jars and supplies. Using the wood he just removed, Roman engineers a seamless trapdoor. He mounts it on heavy hinges and carves a hidden notch for a small chain pull, making the door sit flush. When closed, the underground pantry completely vanishes into the floor. The kitchen has finally found its order. There is a dedicated place to cook, eat, and store supplies. Now, his working tools need that same logic, but space inside a subterranean shelter is precious and scarce. Roman has to find a creative solution. He wants to use the empty wall behind the dining booth, but simply hanging sharp tools where he wants to sit is not an option. The problem is space. A normal tool rack would take over the wall, and a normal bench back wastes valuable storage potential. So he decides to combine both into one system. He is building a pair of hinged wooden racks. When lifted, they will open like panels, giving access to the tools stored behind the slats. When lowered, they will become the backrest for the dining bench. Roman did not begin this project as an expert. He has become more capable by meeting each problem as it comes. With every repair, every failed attempt, and every new solution, he learns a little more. And that only makes him more eager to keep improving. A fixed hinge gives each rack its pivot point, while a simple elastic cord keeps the panels in place when folded. It is a small mechanism, but it solves two problems at once. Tool storage when he is working, and a comfortable booth when he is sitting. The shelter now has a functioning bedroom and kitchen. It can breathe, hold heat, and support daily life, and it has proven it can stay livable through the winter. Now, as the cold starts to loosen its grip, it begins teaching him the next lesson. The recent snowmelt proves the sunken entryway is extremely vulnerable. When the seasonal rains return, those stairs will flood constantly. His first instinct is a quick fix. He stretches a camouflage tarp over the stairs, hoping to keep the water out. It covers the problem, but it does not really solve it. It doesn't take long to realize it is entirely impractical, flimsy, and too frustrating to put on and take off every time the weather changes. He needs a permanent structural solution, which now means extending the canopy over the door. He starts at the existing roof, adding a few short, upright supports. These give the new canopy a solid high point, so it can slope down naturally over the entrance. Then he drives heavier wooden posts right into the ground below. These act as the outer legs of the new canopy, holding up the front edge and turning the whole thing into a real, solid frame. This new extension will be different from the roof, and it cannot really be buried. It reaches forward over the entrance, supported by posts. And adding soil would make it unnecessarily heavy. So Roman chooses corrugated roofing sheets to cover it instead. They are light, rigid, fast to install, and shaped to shed water quickly. The ridges help guide rain down and away from the stairs, which is exactly what the entrance needs. He softens the look with dry grass on top, helping the new canopy blend with the older earth-covered roof. The extended canopy is finally complete. It will keep snow and rain away from the door, but it has also given Roman something unexpected: a roofed front porch. And a proper porch requires proper seating. For the first time, the dugout has a sheltered outdoor space, protected from weather, shaded from the coming sun, and open to the yard around it. So Roman turns to the leftover logs and timber scattered around the property. Pining two massive log sections together, he builds a rugged outdoor sofa. A few shaped pieces become the backrest, and a naturally curved log gives it a perfect rustic armrest. Beside it, he fashions a simple side table from a thick log round and sturdy branches. To soften the heavy wood, he cuts an old fur-lined hide to size, draping it over the seat for a final touch of comfort. As Roman sits back, the scale of the project is finally clear. He dug a massive pit by himself, faced summer storms, and built something he had never attempted before. Against all odds, he managed to beat the season and fully enclosed the cabin right before the snow arrived. And even through the freezing winter, he fully outfitted the space with insulation, ventilation, food storage, furniture, and heat control. He took a raw fire pit and turned it into a proper wood-burning stove. What began as a hole in the dirt is no longer just a survival shelter, it is a thriving off-grid homestead. He has a dedicated kitchen to cook, store food, and organize his tools. A warm bed protected from the elements where he can gaze up at the stars, and a winter-proof underground fortress built by his own two hands as he dreamed of for years. Rain or snow, Roman can finally spend as much time here as he wants.